Hello, and welcome back to Oh, and That's a Bad Miss. It's been a little while. I guess the season's not been on. I did at the end of the last episode, which has been, 2 months? Say that there was going to be a few episodes during the summer break. I will explain why they didn't come about after. I have obviously plugged the same website I plug every episode, reddit.com/r/snooker. It's a subreddit dedicated to snooker where you can talk about everything, and with the season starting up again, we've got our discussion threads for every day of every major tournament, as well as competitions for the Masters, UK Championships and World Championships, and all sorts of nonsense. You know what it's like. People posting their practice routines, people posting their highest breaks. We often have just a little chat in there. It's a nice little community. If you're looking for somewhere to come talk about snooker, looks friendly, spam-free, have a look. What's the worst that can happen? So yeah, I did say that we'd have a couple of episodes over the summer break. The one I was most looking forward to was going to be one of the head developers from Ripstone Games coming on to talk about Snooker 19. And that fell apart relatively early on. We had it decided that, they'd be willing to come on, and my issue was they wanted a list of questions. So it was simply going to be questions that they'd pre-prepared, that I'd prepared to ask them, and they'd have their answers pre-prepared. So it was very, very corporate, very, not very me. Because I sent them back a reply, and I said I'd be interested in talking, just half an hour, 15 minutes. I could make it a part of the podcast instead of making it an entire podcast in itself. So I was just hoping for a quick chat, maybe to talk about some of the things that they don't seem to be addressing in the game. There's a lot of bugs that have been known by the community and obviously have been known by the developers for a long time, since release and beyond, that aren't being addressed, and they aren't apologising for them. I wanted to ask them, I guess you could say I wanted to ask some difficult questions to them, and obviously if they'd been able to pre-prepare their answers, it wouldn't have been as interesting. It wouldn't have been as honest. And I thought you guys would probably rather just not have the interview than have pre-prepared, boring question and answer. If they're willing now, maybe, to come on and just have a conversation about the game instead of Q&A, I'll be willing to. I'm willing to do that with anyone within snooker. But I just don't like the idea of corporate interviews, because then it is just promotion for them. It's not actually interesting you guys, it's not interesting me, because I'd get bored as anything having to listen to them talk corporate mumbo jumbo and pretend that everything was fine with the game when it's not. I mean, I've enjoyed the game. I must have 20-30 hours in it, which I'm working full time, I've got other shit to do. That's a good amount of time to put into a video game, so I do enjoy it, and I think it's a snooker video game, so how am I going to complain about that? And yeah, I think that sort of sums it up. No ill will towards them at all. We just clearly wanted separate things, and I thought I owed you guys an explanation as to why that podcast never showed up during the summer. And the other reason is there was no podcast during the summer. Not much actually happened within the world of snooker over the summer. Everyone sort of went a bit quiet. Nothing happened pretty much for a couple of months, which is good, because the only things that tend to come out of it's a saying in the NFL, in American football, that you check the newspaper every day hoping you don't have news from your team, because the only news to come out of the off season is negative. So obviously a quiet off season is good for everyone. Everyone's getting their practice in or enjoying themselves, doing whatever they want, and there's no negativity, there's no issues between WPBSA and the players. There's no issues with anything. So yeah, happy. I'm happy, and I'm also happy because over the off season, the podcast continued to grow. We've now hit over 1,000 downloads, which that's not including YouTube views either. So that's just people who have actively gone to Apple Music, podcast apps, on Android, on however you get your actual podcast through podcasting apps other than YouTube. And that means over 1,000 times people have done that, and that blows my mind. 1,000 people, not 1,000 people, but so 18 episodes. Someone can do the maths. We got to say it's probably 100 and something people, I think, have come along and just said, yeah, I'm gonna listen to this dude talk about snooker, and I've had some really good feedback, and I've seen my name pop up. I haven't had to be pushing the podcast because I've actually seen you guys pushing it for me. That's incredible. Again, thank you for that. I feel like I have to do this every episode, but it's because between each episode I see more and more positivity from you guys regarding the podcast, and I'm absolutely chuffed. Who would have thought that a 21-year-old postie from Dorset with a little bit of a lisp would have multiple people listening to him talking about snooker, and this is just a passion project. I'm not paid for this. The Reddit promotion is just sort of me promoting my 2 passion projects. It blows my mind. Anyway, I've spent 6 minutes nearly talking about bollocks, so not literally. But let's get back to the end of last season, because I believe I released the podcast before the final had finished, and we were looking as if it was going to be a walkover by Judd Trump, and it almost was. John Higgins pushed it into the final session and nearly made a 147. That was spectacular, but the quality of Judd Trump's play to win the World Championship at the end of last season was spectacular. I have never seen a performance like that in a World Championship. Absolutely incredible, and that's one of the main things I'm looking forward to in this season, is seeing how Judd can grow and progress as a player, because a lot of people said he lacked the maturity, and he did for a long time, but I think he proved when he won the Masters he's progressed in maturity, and he hopefully he'll continue to, because he can either rest on his laurels and go back to his over risky play, his over reliance on showmanship, and hopefully he progresses into an even more mature game, because he could be dominating if he plays as well as he did at the end of the World Championships. Domination, no doubt in my mind. Anyway, back to the almost modern day, which is back at the end of June, so a month ago. Slowly catching up. We had the World Cup, which is only a minor tournament, and we had a final of Scotland versus China B. Team Scotland was Stephen Maguire and John Higgins, and China B was Zhao Yulong and Yan Bingtao. I guess you could say that's a bit of sort of the last generation of players versus the next generation of players, and not looking good for the next generation if that is the case, because Scotland won 4-0, taking revenge, because 4 years ago China beat Scotland in the final, so looks like they're doing pretty well on the international circuit. Not that there really is one for snooker. It's almost a bit of a forced World Cup sort of thing. I can't see it ever sort of progressing to the levels of, obviously nothing will come close to football, but cricket, rugby, all of that stuff. It's just a bit of fun. I feel like the coverage was pretty abysmal, but the players seem to enjoy it and just sort of have a bit of a laugh with it. So who am I to complain? It's snooker, just sort of outside of the season. Why not? Now, we did come back finally to the first ranking event of the 2019-2020 season, and it was the Riga Masters this week just gone by on Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Only a 3-day event. £50,000 to the winner. Not bad going. 50k for 3 days work. Oh, that'd be alright, wouldn't it? I noticed a few more top names entering this year than I had in previous years. It might just be me sort of, I don't know, nitpicking, or me, I don't know, maybe I'm a bit biased, but I thought I saw more top names. Like we had Mark Selby, we had Mark Williams, we had John Higgins, we had Neil Robertson enter and Kyron Wilson enter. They didn't quite make it. As you may have heard, Neil Robertson, who has won the Riga Masters 2 out of the last 3 years, had his flight cancelled alongside 8 other players, including Kyron Wilson and Joe O'Connor. Joe O'Connor, if you're not familiar with that name, defeated John Higgins twice last season and had a couple of decent runs in some quite large-scale tournaments. He plays very well when he can, and I'm sure he was hoping to kickstart his season better than being sat at Luton Airport. I believe it was because initially a private jet landed and there was shrapnel debris because it burst a tyre. There was debris on the runway, so once they cleared that off, the storm came. The flight ended up getting cancelled from Luton Airport. Problem was, obviously, going to Riga, it's not a huge city. There were no flights in time for their matches, their first round matches. And some people have said you should have gone out a few days early instead of the night before, which is understandable. And if you ever travel by plane, you know it's not that reliable. So I have to side with those people and say, yeah, a couple of days earlier would have been nice. One man who did go out a few days early was Mark Selby, who managed to win 2 rounds worth of matches. So he went through 2 rounds without having to play a match because both of his opponents withdrew. Unbelievable. I bet he's chuffed with that extra bit of money for doing literally nothing other than turning up on time for his match. So with Kyron Wilson and Neil Robertson out, many saw it as an opportunity for Mark Williams, Mark Selby or Jack Lisowski to take a nice early boost to their season. And that didn't happen, funnily enough. Mark Selby lost to Stuart Carrington in the last 16. Jack Lisowski lost to Mark Joyce in the very same round. And Mark Williams lost a round earlier in the last 32 to Lu Honghao. And again, Lu Honghao, not exactly the upper echelon of player. And you may... obviously, he is one of the top players in the world, but he's not top 16. He's not a household name within snooker. But you may remember him from the World Championships. He played Shaun Murphy in the first round and was the second player in history to be whitewashed. He lost 10-0 in the first round, and I think he scored 80-something points, which was a new low record pointage at the Crucible. So with those, I mean, to knock out Mark Williams in the last 32 of an event must have felt very good for him. Especially after, because obviously he hasn't really played much snooker between losing 10-0 at the Crucible and now. That left a very strange quarter-final lineup. One of those ones, I don't think there was a single top 16 player in the quarterfinals. You had Yan Bingtao versus Li Hang, Matthew Selt versus Mark King, Stuart Carrington versus Mark Joyce, Kurt Mafflin versus Lu Honghao. I apologise for my pronunciations are off. I'm not a man of culture. I just go by what the commentators on the telly say. But there's, out of that quarterfinal lineup, out of the 8 players we've got there, only 2 of them had ever won a ranking event before, and they played each other. Matthew Selt winning the Indian Open last season, and Mark King obviously winning the Northern Ireland Open in 2017, 2018, 2016. Yeah, something. One of the home nations events a few years ago, Mark King finally won. And that's a very strange scenario. And the semi-finals came down to Yan Bingtao versus Matthew Selt and Mark Joyce versus Kurt Mafflin. So obviously only one ranking event winner, previous ranking event winner in the semi-final, leaving 3 players who are all promising. Yan Bingtao, Mark Joyce and Kurt Mafflin have all sort of been knocking on the door for a while. I have to say Yan Bingtao more than others. And Mark Joyce, he's never progressed further than a quarter-final of a ranking event. I'm not a fan of watching him play, personally. I think he plays very slowly. I don't know what it is. Maybe it might just be an ingrained bias. Maybe I watched one match with him where he was playing particularly slow and now I overly notice it. Kurt Mafflin, I actually haven't watched enough of him to have a strong opinion, but obviously any player to win their first ranking event's an incredible moment. And yeah, the final ended up being Yan Bingtao versus Mark Joyce, and I don't think anyone would have predicted that final at the beginning of the tournament when you look at the other names that were available. But as I'm sure you're aware, and if you're not, you're in for a nice surprise, Yan Bingtao triumphed in the final, winning 5-2, which is his maiden ranking event, and it was the second time he's been in a ranking event final. He lost the 2017 Northern Ireland Open to Mark Williams after being 8-7 up. Mark took the last 2 frames to win the deciding frame, the last 2 frames, which he needed because it was a best of... let me do my maths. Trust me. I got a B at GCSE maths, so I can figure this one out. Okay, so if it's first to 9, it's a best of 17. Yes. No? Oh, good lord, I'm thick. Yes, best of 6, because it was... Yeah, best of 17. There you go. using my noggin here. It's been a long day. I've just done a 12-hour shift at work, and in this heat, it is melting my brain. But anyway, Yan, by winning that tournament, Bing Tao became the first player born after the year 2000 to win a ranking event, which is really depressing because the lad's only 19. He's won his first ranking event. He's just pocketed £50,000. He could have done enough to qualify for the first match of the Coral Cup. But sorry, I got distracted there. He could have done enough to qualify for the first Coral tournament because last year the first Coral. This is a tongue twister I wasn't expecting. The first Coral tournament is the top 32 players playing against each other on the 1-year earnings list. And last season, it was Gary Wilson who took the 32nd spot, and that he had £48,500 worth of winnings. And Yan has just pocketed £50,000 in the first event. So you would have thought he'd probably done enough to qualify for that event, which is always good because more snooker, you're gonna be more used to playing the top tier players. You're gonna get better. You're gonna earn more money, which allows you to invest more in practice. Which it's a snowball effect. And obviously, he's also qualified for the Champion of Champions because he's won a ranking event. He's won a tournament, therefore he's in the Champion of Champions, which is a very prestigious tournament, which I very much enjoy. Yeah, the lad's only 19. What were you doing at 19? What was I doing at 19? I don't even remember. That's the problem. Drinking. It was only 2 years ago. Should remember that. But yeah, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't winning ranking events. That is a very depressing fact when I think that he is 19 years of age. Oof. So, that was the Riga Masters. Only the first tournament, but we had a hell of a lot going on over just 3 days. And I am very much looking forward to the season ahead, personally. There's a lot to look out for. Like I mentioned earlier, the progression of Judd Trump's game, the dominance Ronnie O'Sullivan showed. Is that going to continue, or is Judd going to cut down Ronnie's earnings? Can someone else go on to the number one spot in the world? Is Mark Selby going to be able to return to form after, he looked like he played pretty well in the one match he had to win to get through to the last 16 before losing to Stuart Carrington. Obviously, the short form matches have never been Selby's forte, but you still would have thought he'd have beat Stuart Carrington. The Selby of old certainly would have, but it's difficult to say. It's not a... When it's a first, because it was best of 7. So when it's first of 4, you can't truly judge a player's form. Excuse me, I'll grab a drink. Yes, so there's plenty to look forward to, especially now Yang Bing Tao has won his first ranking event title. Could he make it a couple? In the same way Ryan Day did it. Ryan Day won the Riga Masters as his first ranking event, and then went on to win another ranking event in the very same season. After waiting, I think it was 15, 20 years to win one, he won 2 in one season. So, what do you guys think? Obviously, I'm always after your input, either via Twitter, at Owen That's A Bad 1, the number 1, I know it's a terrible tag, and on YouTube comments or reddit.com/r/snooker, we've got a dedicated thread for the podcast. Yes, I think that about sums up the first week back of the season. I'm chuffed to be back watching snooker. I watched as much of the Riga Masters as I could, which wasn't as much as I would have liked, with work, of course. I always tend to complain about work on this thing, but that's none of your guys' problems. And I hope you guys are looking forward to another season of weekly, normally, unless it's been a particularly quiet week, in which case bi-weekly podcasts. And again, thank you for the support on here. And yeah, if there's anything you... As always, I'm after constructive criticism. So if you guys... I'm a big boy. If you think something's shit, if you think some parts of the podcast are terrible, tell me. If you want to spread the word, Twitter, social, word of mouth, that's how podcasts spread. And I've seen you guys doing it, so I know you do it. You're a good bunch you listen to this. So have a good rest of your week, and I will see you next Monday.